Boruto must thwart Kashin Koji's plan to sacrifice his friends in order to save Himawari and Ida from their dark fate. Yep, at least that's the title that represents the entire topic of our discussion for the next 8 minutes. I'm Nim without the E, and I would really appreciate it if you all could push the hype button on this video. Love you guys. So yeah, first and foremost, I think this topic is a continuation of a scenario from the previous video about Ida. But this is the opposite version. When a terrible scenario happens to Ida and several probabilities literally make several characters her targets, at least they are the characters who play the most crucial roles. Characters such as Damon, Kawaki, Boruto, and even Kashin Koji. If they become targets of Ida's Shinju, this would certainly be very interesting. But this time, let's try to look at it from another perspective. A perspective that certainly does not lead to Ida becoming Shinju, or characters such as Damon, Kawaki, Boruto, or even Koji becoming targets if Ida becomes Shinju. In other words, what if we return to the scenario where Kashin Koji awakens Sarada's power? At this point, the most crucial thing from a different perspective is that Boruto must save his friends in exchange for their deaths. And simply put, I think there is a similar concept when awakening a character's power and avoiding the character's death. And all of that leads to consequences, or more precisely, an exchange of lives. Because once again, when Sarada awakens her power, it will obviously lead to an ideal future according to Kashin Koji. And speaking of an ideal future, it's the same as avoiding death. In other words, there's a price to pay. But if you're still confused and don't fully understand what I mean, let me explain it again. The point is, there is a similar pattern between awakening someone's power and avoiding someone's fate of death. Both always demand consequences or an exchange of fate. 1. Koji doesn't just want to save the future, he wants to rewrite it. In this scenario, Kashin Koji's position is like a guardian of fate. He knows what could potentially become a problem in the future, and what could be the key to saving or even making the future better. That's why when a dark scenario haunts Ida and Himawari, Koji tries to take preventive measures. But the problem is, these preventive measures aren't just about helping or avoiding, but go as far as sacrificing others to keep the future ideal. Sarada is the clearest example. When Koji triggered the awakening of Sarada's power, it wasn't just about a power-up, it was a step to lock in a certain future by sacrificing Yodo's life. So every great power that is awakened in an unnatural way always has repercussions, starting from other characters losing something like their lives, paths of destiny shifting or branching, or even a price that must be paid to get the future Koji wants. So if Sarada levels up in strength and ability, there must be someone else who has to pay for it all. Koji knows that, and he planned it that way. And even though it sounds evil or something, for Kashin Koji, it's a valuable exchange. But what's the problem? Boruto strongly opposes and rejects it. So the concept of fate exchange is basically like saving X means sacrificing Y. Yeah, you know what I mean, right? Avoiding Ida's death could mean transferring that fate to someone else. Preventing Himawari's dark fate means someone else has to take that consequence. And awakening Sarada's power also means there's a price taken from another character's future. So there's a consistent pattern. All of these actions are a form of barter. Koji believes it is the only way to keep the future stable and ideal. But Boruto sees it as an unnecessary sacrifice, an undeserved sacrifice because life is everything. Because Boruto and Kashin Koji are two different entities. Boruto is human and Kashin Koji is a cyborg. Boruto is even willing to die to protect his friends and the entire village he loves. He is willing to die if that is the best way. So in conclusion, awakening power comes at a price. Avoiding death equals there is a price. Saving Aida and Hima, there is a price. And that price, Koji wants to pay with the fate of Boruto's friends. And since this topic is about the price that must be paid in exchange, at least in my opinion, these are the 3 characters who will become victims. But once again, these 3 characters do not mean that all of them will be sacrificed, but only one of them. Yeah, you know what I mean, right? The first is Inojin. From the beginning, how Koji brought Inojin into this scenario, especially when Koji explained about a destiny or future that couldn't be explained in detail to him, there was one sentence, or more accurately, a pattern that I think Koji took advantage of behind Inojin's feelings. In short, when Koji tells him that his fate is to die at Jura's hands if he tries to save Himawari, Koji is very sure that at that moment, Inojin will be frozen in fear. As a result, it will not awaken Himawari's power. On the other hand, with the confirmation that Inojin likes Himawari, plus the fact that Himawari's death is revealed in another timeline, this is why I think it makes perfect sense that Inojin will pay for Himawari's death. Even though Kashin Koji did not say directly that Inojin, especially with his new power, could help avoid that dark future, there is obviously a purpose behind all of this. At the very least, they must change any future where Aida and Himawari die. But the real question is there any guarantee that, in the end, Kashin Koji won't sacrifice Inojin? Instead of awakening new power and involving Inojin for Himawari's sake, what if Inojin is actually the one who gets sacrificed in the end? Because in my opinion, if something like that happens for the second time, I'm very certain it would awaken another power within Himawari, right? Because if we refer to the earlier dialogue, where Inojin knows he's fated to die at Jura's hands if he tries to save Himawari, and he ends up frozen in fear, that would prevent Himawari from awakening her power. So to me, this scenario makes a lot of sense, but what do you guys think? The second is Sumire and Sarada, but in my opinion, for some very logical reasons, it's Sumire. Because for Sarada herself, she has quite a lot of plot armor. Yeah, you know what I mean, right? So I think Sumire is the most logical. But if you still feel that this doesn't make sense, let me explain until the end. So the reason it has to be Sumire is because she's the one who's truly involved in Ida's genuine friendship. After Sarada and Sumire managed to escape Ida and Damon's suspicion, back when Ida felt something was off about why those two weren't affected by her charm, Ida assumed it was the result of their deepest desires, making Sarada and Sumire exceptions. And even though I know you guys disagreed when I said that Sumire might be the one who has to pay the price to save Ida from her death fate, especially considering that Sumire is Amado's assistant and has contributed to Boruto's power-up, that's exactly the point. Meaning, with those facts combined, and considering that Sumire has become Ida's true friend, there is a probability that this kind of life exchange could trigger some sort of power or awakening within Ida. Because even though we know Ida isn't fully human, I still believe she has a heart and feelings. Logically, Ida feels that her abilities are something that prevent her from finding true love or even sincere friends, which means that even though she is a cyborg, she is still part human and has feelings. And we also know that love and sincerity are weapons that have a huge impact. If Sumire has to be sacrificed for Ida, I think this should trigger something bigger within Ida herself, right? But what do you think? Lastly, there's Chocho. But for this case, I really want to hear it from your perspective. However, once again, if you think there's a character outside of these three who is more relevant or makes more sense, let me know in the comments. And finally, and this is the most important part, do you agree with me that in order to save Himawari and Ida from their death fate, there must be a price paid in the form of a life? And does this mean Boruto has to act before Kashin Koji sacrifices them, just like Yodo and Sarada? I think once Boruto learns that Kashin Koji plans to sacrifice some of his friends for the sake of an ideal future, this is the point where Boruto starts doubting every plan Kashin Koji has made. And yeah, that's pretty much the end of what I personally find to be a very interesting topic. Thanks for watching, like and subscribe. I'm Nim without the E, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye, Data Bio.